The fear of confrontation is a weakness that many men experience, often without fully realizing its impact on their lives. It is a subtle yet powerful force that shapes the way they interact with others and ultimately how they navigate their personal and professional worlds. For men who struggle with this fear, confrontation becomes something to avoid at all costs. Whether it's disagreeing with a colleague, expressing dissatisfaction in a relationship, or standing up for oneself in a challenging situation, the thought of confrontation often triggers a deep sense of discomfort. The idea of facing conflict can feel overwhelming and unsettling, leading to avoidance or submission. While the desire to avoid confrontation may seem like a way to keep the peace, it can be deeply harmful in the long run. Avoiding confrontation does not make problems disappear. In fact, it often exacerbates them, leading to unresolved tensions, unspoken frustrations, and growing resentment. The fear of confrontation is rooted in a desire to maintain harmony, but in doing so, a man sacrifices his personal integrity, his needs, and his values. When a man is unwilling to confront difficult issues, he opens the door for others to control the narrative, dictate his actions, and exploit his silence. Over time, this fear can erode a man's self-respect, leaving him feeling powerless, invisible, and stuck in relationships and situations that do not serve him. However, confrontation, when done correctly, is not something to fear. In fact, it can be one of the most empowering tools for a man to reclaim control of his life. Confrontation is not about aggression or hostility. It is about standing up for oneself, expressing one's thoughts and feelings clearly, and addressing issues that hinder personal growth or the health of a relationship. The key is learning how to engage in confrontation respectfully and constructively. When done well, confrontation builds trust, fosters open communication, and strengthens relationships, whether personal or professional. Overcoming the fear of confrontation, therefore, is not just about learning to face conflict. It's about learning how to face it with confidence, clarity, and respect. In doing so, a man can regain his personal power, assert his boundaries, and live a life that reflects his true values and desires. Number 1. Emotional validation. Dependence. Emotional validation dependence is a weakness that many men face, often without realizing the extent to which it controls their actions and decisions. It is the constant need for external approval, affirmation, or validation from others to feel emotionally secure or valued. A man who is emotionally dependent on others for validation often struggles with self-worth and can become overly reliant on the opinions and approval of those around him. This dependency creates a fragile sense of self-esteem, one that fluctuates with the feedback and reactions of others. Rather than drawing confidence from within, such a man finds it hard to feel secure unless others mirror his feelings or offer praise. At its core, emotional validation dependence is rooted in a lack of internal validation. A man who seeks constant approval from others tends to feel empty or inadequate without it. He may constantly look for reassurance from his partner, friends, or colleagues to confirm that he is doing the right thing or that he is worthy of love and respect. This can manifest in various ways: seeking compliments, constantly asking for feedback, or feeling devastated when others fail to provide the validation he seeks. The more he depends on others to fill this emotional void, the more he loses touch with his own inner strength and sense of identity. This dependence is particularly dangerous in relationships. A man who relies on external validation often becomes overly attuned to his partner's emotions and opinions, losing sight of his own needs and desires. He may sacrifice his own happiness, comfort, or principles just to gain approval. This creates an unhealthy dynamic in which he places his value in the hands of someone else, making him vulnerable to manipulation and emotional instability. When a partner fails to provide the desired validation, the man may feel rejected, anxious, or unworthy, which further erodes his self-esteem. The cycle of seeking validation and being disappointed by its absence becomes emotionally exhausting and harmful to both the individual and the relationship. Moreover, emotional validation dependence stifles personal growth and resilience. A man who constantly seeks validation from others often avoids taking risks or pursuing his own goals because he is afraid of failing without the reassurance of others. He may feel paralyzed by self-doubt, fearing that without the validation of those around him, he won't be successful or worthy. This fear can prevent him from stepping outside his comfort zone, exploring new opportunities, or developing his own sense of purpose. Without the ability to validate himself, he becomes reliant on external sources of affirmation, which ultimately leaves him stuck in a cycle of dependency and dissatisfaction. The key to overcoming emotional validation dependence lies in developing self-awareness and self-compassion. A man must learn to recognize his worth independently of external approval. This begins with shifting the focus inward, acknowledging and accepting one's own strengths, accomplishments, and values. By practicing self-validation, a man can build a strong foundation of self-esteem that does not rely on the fluctuating opinions of others. Affirming oneself through positive self-talk, setting personal boundaries, and pursuing goals that align with his values can help break the cycle of emotional validation dependence. Over time, this practice leads to greater emotional stability, confidence, and resilience. Ultimately, emotional validation dependence weakens a man's ability to stand confidently in his own sense of worth and identity. To truly reclaim his power, a man must learn to validate himself from within. By doing so, he will no longer need to seek constant external approval, allowing him to live authentically, make decisions based on his own values, and build relationships grounded in mutual respect rather than dependency. Number 2. Fear of being alone. The fear of being alone is a profound and often crippling weakness that many men experience. It manifests in the constant need for companionship or validation from others to feel secure, valued, or emotionally fulfilled. While loneliness is a natural part of the human experience, those who fear being alone tend to view it as a threat to their happiness and sense of self-worth. This fear can push men to avoid solitude at all costs, making them excessively dependent on relationships, friendships, or external validation for their emotional stability. Unfortunately, this dependency creates an unhealthy reliance on others, which can impede their ability to grow as individuals and live authentically. At the heart of the fear of being alone is often a deep-seated insecurity or sense of inadequacy. A man who fears loneliness may feel incomplete or unworthy when not in the presence of others. He may mistakenly believe that his value is tied to his social interactions or relationships, causing him to constantly seek out others' company for reassurance and emotional fulfillment. This pattern of behavior may lead to compromising personal boundaries, settling for unhealthy relationships, or clinging to situations that do not align with his true desires simply to avoid being alone. This fear can also manifest as a fear of abandonment or rejection, which intensifies the emotional distress associated with solitude. A man who fears being abandoned may find himself tolerating toxic relationships, desperately trying to keep people in his life, even if they are harmful to his well-being. This is because the idea of being left alone, both physically and emotionally, seems unbearable. The intense desire to avoid loneliness may cloud his judgment and prevent him from making choices that align with his values and long-term goals. Furthermore, The fear of being alone often leads to a lack of emotional self-sufficiency. Rather than learning to process and manage his emotions independently, a man who fears solitude might rely heavily on others to fulfill emotional needs. This can create a sense of dependency where he feels incapable of being happy, content, or at peace without the presence of others. As a result, his emotional well-being becomes tied to external factors, leaving him vulnerable to feelings of emptiness when those sources of validation are absent. This constant need for external affirmation prevents him from building a strong internal foundation of self-worth. Ironically, the fear of being alone can also stifle personal growth. When a man is constantly seeking out distractions or relationships to avoid solitude, he misses out on the invaluable opportunity for self-reflection, introspection, and personal development. Time alone provides a chance for a man to get in touch with his inner thoughts, values, and desires, elements essential for making empowered decisions and leading a fulfilling life. Fear of being alone denies him this opportunity, trapping him in a cycle of external validation and emotional dependence. Overcoming the fear of being alone requires a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing solitude as something negative or frightening, a man must learn to embrace it as a means of personal empowerment. By spending time alone, he can reconnect with his true self, discover his passions, and build emotional resilience. Embracing solitude teaches self-reliance, allowing a man to find peace and contentment within himself, rather than depending on others to provide it. Over time, this shift can lead to a more balanced, fulfilling life, where relationships are built on mutual respect and emotional independence, rather than fear and dependency. Ultimately, the fear of being alone is a weakness that undermines a man's sense of self-worth and personal growth. By learning to embrace solitude and cultivate emotional self-sufficiency, a man can build a stronger foundation of inner strength and confidence. This not only leads to greater personal fulfillment, but also creates the space for healthier, more authentic relationships with others. Number 3. Lack of self-control. A lack of self-control is a weakness that many men struggle with, and it can significantly hinder their personal and professional progress. Self-control is the ability to regulate one's emotions, behaviors, and desires in the face of external demands, and it is essential for achieving long-term goals and maintaining healthy relationships. When a man lacks self-control, he is often driven by impulse, making decisions that provide instant gratification without considering the long-term consequences. This can manifest in various ways, such as overeating, procrastination, impulsive spending, or emotional outbursts, all of which can ultimately lead to feelings of regret, failure, and unfulfilled potential. At its core, the lack of self-control is a reflection of a man's inability to delay gratification. The desire for immediate pleasure or relief can overpower reason and restraint, causing a man to make choices that are not aligned with his goals or values. This behavior not only impedes personal growth, but also undermines a man's ability to meet his responsibilities and achieve his ambitions. Whether it's spending money impulsively instead of saving for the future, indulging in unhealthy habits that damage the body, or neglecting important work to engage in distractions, the lack of self-control keeps a man stuck in a cycle of short-term satisfaction at the expense of long-term success. This weakness also affects a man's emotional stability. Without self-control, emotions can easily spiral out of control, leading to outbursts of anger, frustration, or anxiety. A man who lacks the ability to manage his emotions may struggle in relationships, as he is more likely to react impulsively in tense situations rather than responding calmly and thoughtfully. This can create unnecessary conflict, cause misunderstandings, and strain relationships with family, friends, and colleagues. Self-control is essential for maintaining emotional balance, and its absence can lead to a sense of instability and constant emotional turmoil. The lack of self-control also undermines discipline, which is a fundamental component of personal growth and success. Discipline enables a man to stay focused on his goals, remain consistent in his efforts, and resist the temptation to deviate from his path. Without it, a man may start multiple projects or set ambitious goals, only to abandon them when the initial excitement fades or when obstacles arise. This inconsistency can lead to a lack of accomplishment and feelings of inadequacy as he fails to follow through on his commitments. Ultimately, a man who lacks self-control is often left with unfulfilled dreams and a sense of frustration over his inability to stay on course. To overcome the lack of self-control, a man must first develop self-awareness. He needs to recognize the moments when he is acting impulsively or making decisions based on immediate desires rather than long-term objectives. From there, he can practice self-discipline by setting clear goals, creating structured plans, and building habits that align with his values and aspirations. Mindfulness techniques, such as meditation or deep breathing, can also help to strengthen emotional regulation and increase self-control over time. Ultimately, self-control is the key to unlocking a man's potential. By developing this crucial trait, a man can make more deliberate, thoughtful decisions, stay focused on his long-term objectives, and build a life that reflects his true values and ambitions. Self-control empowers him to resist distractions, overcome challenges, and create lasting success, both in his personal life and in his career. Number 4. Ego and pride. Manipulation. Ego and pride manipulation is a powerful weakness that can negatively impact a man's relationships and his sense of personal integrity. When a man is driven by ego and pride, he becomes more concerned with protecting his self-image and appearing superior to others than with genuine connection, growth, or humility. Manipulating or being manipulated through these traits can lead to toxic behaviors that erode trust, foster resentment, and create emotional distance in both personal and professional relationships. Whether it's using flattery, guilt, or subtle power plays, ego and pride manipulation often comes from a place of insecurity and the need to feel validated at the expense of others. At its core, ego and pride manipulation arises when a man allows his sense of self-importance to override healthy communication and mutual respect. He may use his pride to control situations, whether it's trying to dominate a conversation, dismissing others' opinions, or constantly seeking recognition and validation. The need to prove himself superior can make him dismissive of others, creating an unhealthy dynamic where respect is contingent on external admiration rather than genuine connection. The manipulation of pride involves using someone's ego against them, knowing that their need for approval or acknowledgement can be exploited to gain power or control. This dynamic can damage personal relationships, as it often leads to a lack of genuine intimacy or emotional honesty. A man who manipulates his partner, friends, or colleagues through pride and ego may refuse to admit his mistakes, deflect responsibility, or avoid vulnerability for fear of looking weak. This creates an environment where open, honest communication is stifled and emotional connections remain shallow. When both parties are focused on protecting their egos rather than being honest and vulnerable with each other, misunderstandings, resentment, and frustration can easily build. Moreover, ego-driven manipulation can prevent personal growth. A man who is too focused on his pride is less likely to self-reflect or acknowledge areas of improvement. If his identity is tied too closely to external recognition or validation, he may avoid constructive criticism and resist growth opportunities that challenge his self-image. In essence, this weakens his ability to evolve, learn from experiences, and develop emotional intelligence. When a person is more invested in defending their pride than in understanding their true self, they become stagnant, emotionally immature, and unable to cultivate meaningful relationships based on mutual respect and trust. Another dangerous aspect of ego and pride manipulation is that it often leads to power struggles. When a man is constantly trying to assert dominance or control through his ego, he may manipulate others to maintain a sense of superiority. This can happen in romantic relationships, workplaces, or friendships, where one party tries to outmaneuver the other for personal gain. These power plays can cause a deep imbalance in the relationship, where both individuals are more focused on winning than on fostering cooperation and mutual respect. In the end, this creates unhealthy dynamics and leaves both individuals emotionally drained and disconnected. To overcome ego and pride manipulation, a man must embrace humility and self-awareness. Recognizing that his self-worth is not dependent on domination, recognition, or the approval of others is essential to breaking the cycle of ego-driven behavior. By practicing humility, he can learn to value collaboration, honesty, and vulnerability in his relationships. A man must also be open to feedback, willing to admit mistakes, and committed to growth and self-improvement. Developing emotional intelligence and empathy will enable him to build healthier, more fulfilling relationships, where both parties can thrive without the need for manipulation or power struggles. Ultimately, ego and pride manipulation is a weakness that prevents men from building authentic, trusting relationships and achieving personal growth. By shifting focus from the need for validation to a deeper understanding of self-worth, humility, and empathy, a man can break free from the cycle of manipulation and create stronger, more meaningful connections with others. Number 5. Over-attachment to love or affection. Over-attachment to love or affection is a weakness that can significantly hinder a man's personal growth and emotional stability. It occurs when a man places an excessive emphasis on receiving love, validation, or affection from others, to the point where it defines his sense of worth and happiness. This over-reliance on external sources of affection creates an unhealthy dependency, leaving him vulnerable to emotional manipulation and instability. While love and affection are vital aspects of human connection, an over-attachment to them can lead to the erosion of self-confidence and the inability to function independently. At its core, over-attachment to love or affection often stems from deep-rooted insecurities or a lack of self-love. A man who does not feel secure in his own worth may seek validation and approval from others, believing that their affection is the key to his happiness. This can manifest in the constant need for attention from a partner, friends, or family, and a fear of losing that affection can lead to behaviors that compromise his authenticity and independence. Over time, the pursuit of external love becomes a substitute for internal emotional fulfillment, making it increasingly difficult to find contentment without others' affection. This attachment to love and affection often leads to emotional dependence, where a man's mood, sense of self, and overall well-being are dictated by the approval or attention he receives from others. When love or affection is withheld, or when the relationship faces challenges, the man may experience intense emotional turmoil, such as anxiety, insecurity, or feelings of inadequacy. This emotional roller coaster occurs because his self-worth is intrinsically tied to the affection he receives, making it difficult to maintain emotional balance or perspective in relationships. In essence, the fear of being unloved or rejected can cloud his judgment and prevent him from forming healthy, stable connections. Furthermore, Over-attachment to love or affection can lead to unhealthy behaviors in relationships. A man who is overly dependent on affection may tolerate toxic behavior, compromise his values, or sacrifice his personal needs to keep a partner's love. This could involve staying in an unhealthy or unfulfilling relationship simply to avoid the discomfort of being alone or unloved. The fear of abandonment or rejection becomes so overwhelming that he may neglect his own happiness and well-being to maintain the illusion of affection, often leading to resentment and emotional exhaustion. This weakness also prevents personal growth and independence. A man who is excessively attached to love or affection may avoid spending time alone or pursuing personal interests for fear that it will cause distance in the relationship. As a result, his identity becomes increasingly entangled with the other person, leading to a loss of individuality and emotional independence. True growth requires a sense of self-sufficiency and the ability to find fulfillment within oneself, rather than relying on another person to provide it. Over-attachment to affection prevents a man from fully developing into his authentic self, stunting his personal evolution. To overcome over-attachment to love or affection, a man must first develop self-love and emotional independence. This involves recognizing that his worth does not depend on external validation or approval, but on his intrinsic qualities and sense of self. By cultivating inner strength and focusing on personal growth, he can begin to form healthier, more balanced relationships where love and affection are shared rather than used as a crutch for emotional security. Practicing self-awareness and mindfulness will also help him recognize when his attachment is becoming unhealthy, allowing him to take steps to regain emotional equilibrium and prevent dependency. Ultimately, over-attachment to love or affection is a weakness that prevents men from achieving emotional stability, independence, and authentic connection. By learning to value oneself and finding fulfillment within, a man can break free from the cycle of dependency and build healthier, more sustainable relationships that are rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and genuine affection. Number 6. Lack of purpose and direction. A lack of purpose and direction is a significant weakness that can hold a man back from realizing his full potential. When a man lacks a clear sense of purpose, he may feel lost or aimless, unsure of what he truly wants to achieve in life. This lack of direction can lead to feelings of frustration, dissatisfaction, and a sense of stagnation. Without a purpose to guide his actions and decisions, a man may find it difficult to stay motivated, make meaningful progress, or feel fulfilled in his endeavors. The absence of a clear vision can leave him vulnerable to distractions, unhealthy habits, and a general sense of unfulfillment. At the heart of lack of purpose is often a disconnect between a man's actions and his values or passions. Without a clear understanding of what truly matters to him, he may struggle to align his daily choices with his long-term goals. As a result, he might drift from one activity to another without a sense of meaning, or he might engage in things that bring momentary pleasure but lack long-term value. This disconnection from purpose creates a feeling of emptiness, as a man's efforts feel directionless and he begins to question the point of his pursuits. Over time, this can erode his confidence and belief in his ability to create a meaningful life. The lack of direction can also have negative effects on a man's self-esteem. When a man feels uncertain about his future, he may begin to doubt his abilities and worth. The feeling of not knowing where he is headed can foster insecurity and lead to indecision or procrastination. Instead of taking bold steps toward his goals, he may second-guess himself, become overwhelmed by the pressure of making the right choices, or avoid making decisions altogether. This cycle of inaction and self-doubt keeps him trapped in a state of confusion and missed opportunities. In addition, a lack of purpose can strain relationships. When a man does not have a clear sense of direction, it can be difficult for him to form strong connections with others. He may struggle to communicate his needs and aspirations, making it harder to engage in meaningful conversations or build supportive networks. Without a sense of direction, he may also have difficulty committing to long-term goals or responsibilities, leaving others frustrated or uncertain about his intentions. Relationships require stability, and when a man lacks purpose, it can create instability that affects both his personal and professional connections. To overcome the lack of purpose and direction, a man must first take time to self-reflect and identify what truly matters to him. This involves understanding his values, passions, and strengths, and aligning them with his actions. He must explore what brings him fulfillment, whether that is a career, personal development, or helping others, and set clear, achievable goals that align with this sense of purpose. With a strong sense of direction, a man can develop a greater sense of motivation, resilience, and focus, which will propel him towards success and fulfillment. Building purpose and direction also requires a commitment to continuous growth. A man must be open to change and learning, willing to adjust his goals and mindset as he evolves. By embracing challenges and staying true to his values, he can develop a deeper sense of meaning in his life. When a man has a clear purpose and direction, he is more likely to feel confident in his decisions, experience a greater sense of fulfillment, and make lasting progress toward his goals. Ultimately, lack of purpose and direction is a weakness that can prevent a man from living a fulfilling and successful life. By gaining clarity on his values and passions, setting goals, and staying committed to personal growth, he can overcome this weakness and move toward a more focused, meaningful existence. Number 7. The need for external validation. The need for external validation is a significant weakness that can undermine a man's sense of self-worth and personal fulfillment. When a man is overly reliant on the approval and recognition of others to feel good about himself, he becomes vulnerable to emotional instability, insecurity, and a lack of true self-confidence. Seeking validation from external sources, such as from friends, family, colleagues, or social media, creates an unhealthy cycle where a man's self-esteem fluctuates based on the opinions of others rather than on his intrinsic value and beliefs. This dependency can prevent him from developing a strong sense of self and achieving lasting happiness. At the core of the need for external validation is often a lack of self-acceptance. When a man is unable to recognize and embrace his own strengths, talents, and worth, he may look to others to provide that affirmation. This external dependence can lead to feelings of insecurity, as he may constantly seek reassurance or approval, never feeling truly confident unless others validate him. In this state, his sense of self becomes conditional, relying on the judgment of others, which can leave him feeling vulnerable to criticism, rejection, or abandonment. The search for validation can also lead to unhealthy behavior patterns, such as people-pleasing or sacrificing personal values to gain approval. A man who is fixated on external validation may go out of his way to please others, even at the cost of his own needs or desires. He might suppress his true thoughts or emotions in order to conform to what others expect, leading to a loss of authenticity. Over time, this constant need to appease others can create frustration, resentment, and a sense of emptiness, as he feels disconnected from his true self. In addition, external validation often encourages a fear of rejection, which can stifle a man's growth and decision-making abilities. When he bases his worth on how others perceive him, he may become afraid to take risks, try new things, or express his true opinions for fear of judgment. This fear of rejection can create a paralysis of inaction, preventing him from pursuing his goals and dreams. He may avoid challenging situations or shy away from stepping out of his comfort zone because he is too concerned with how others will react. This limits his personal growth and keeps him trapped in a cycle of pleasing others, rather than pursuing what he truly wants. The need for external validation also leads to emotional instability. Since a man's sense of worth is constantly shifting based on others' opinions, he may experience extreme highs and lows. When he receives praise or approval, he may feel temporarily elated, but these feelings quickly fade as the need for more validation arises. Conversely, when he faces criticism or neglect, his self-esteem plummets, leaving him vulnerable to feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. This emotional roller coaster creates a sense of unease, making it difficult to find true happiness or inner peace. To overcome the need for external validation, a man must focus on developing self-awareness and self-acceptance. This involves recognizing his intrinsic value and building confidence from within. By cultivating self-love and acknowledging his unique qualities, he can begin to break free from the cycle of seeking external approval. Embracing his own strengths and weaknesses allows him to stand firm in his beliefs and actions, regardless of how others perceive him. With time, he will find that his sense of worth becomes more stable and his happiness less dependent on others' opinions. In essence, the need for external validation is a weakness that can prevent a man from living authentically, making confident decisions, and experiencing lasting fulfillment. By shifting his focus inward and developing a strong sense of self, he can break free from the constant need for approval and create a life that is grounded in self-respect, authenticity, and true happiness. Number 8. The inability to say no. The inability to say no is a significant weakness that can cause a man to overextend himself, lose control over his time, and become overwhelmed by external demands. When a man struggles to set boundaries and assert himself, he is often left saying yes to requests, obligations, or expectations that do not align with his values or priorities. This inability to say no often stems from a deep desire to please others, fear of rejection, or concern about how others will perceive him. While being accommodating and helpful are positive traits, failing to establish limits can lead to emotional burnout, resentment, and a lack of personal fulfillment. One of the core reasons for the inability to say no is a fear of conflict or confrontation. Many men avoid saying no because they do not want to disappoint others, fear hurting their feelings, or worry about being labeled as selfish or uncooperative. This fear can cause them to acquiesce to requests, even when doing so causes them stress, anxiety, or discomfort. Over time, this can lead to a pattern where the man continuously sacrifices his own well-being to meet the demands of others, losing sight of his own needs and priorities. In these situations, the man becomes a people pleaser, driven by the desire to maintain peace and approval, even at the expense of his own happiness. The inability to say no also contributes to overcommitment. When a man continuously agrees to take on tasks, attend events, or help others, he may find himself juggling multiple responsibilities at once. While this may seem like a demonstration of goodwill and a strong work ethic, it quickly becomes unsustainable. The man may feel overwhelmed, stressed, or burnt out from trying to meet everyone's expectations. When he overextends himself, he risks neglecting his own goals, health, and personal time. His life becomes consumed by the obligations of others, leaving little room for his own aspirations or self-care. As a result, he may feel drained and resentful, questioning whether his efforts are truly appreciated or valued. Another consequence of failing to say no is a loss of self-respect and personal boundaries. Setting boundaries is essential for maintaining a healthy relationship with oneself and others. By constantly putting others' needs ahead of his own, a man risks losing his sense of autonomy. His self-worth becomes linked to how much he can give to others, and this can lead to feelings of inadequacy or frustration when he is unable to meet every demand. Without clear boundaries, the man becomes susceptible to emotional manipulation or exploitation, as others may take advantage of his inability to assert himself. This undermines his confidence and weakens his ability to maintain control over his own life. The inability to say no can also negatively affect relationships. While initially people may appreciate a man who is always willing to help, over time they may begin to take him for granted. If he is unable to set limits, others may expect him to be available whenever they need him, regardless of his own needs. This can create an imbalance in relationships, where the man gives more than he receives, leading to feelings of frustration, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Additionally, a lack of boundaries can breed unhealthy dynamics, where others feel entitled to demand his time or energy without considering his own priorities. To overcome the inability to say no, a man must first develop self-awareness and recognize the importance of establishing boundaries. This involves understanding that saying no is not a rejection of others, but rather a way of protecting his own well-being and prioritizing his needs. It requires being confident in his values and goals, and learning to communicate his limits with respect and assertiveness. Saying no can be uncomfortable at first, but it is a necessary skill that allows a man to take control of his time, energy, and emotional health. By setting clear boundaries, he can maintain a balanced, fulfilling life and build healthier, more respectful relationships with others. In essence, the inability to say no is a weakness that leaves a man vulnerable to burnout, resentment, and a lack of personal fulfillment. By embracing the power of setting boundaries and learning to say no when necessary, a man can reclaim his time, preserve his emotional health, and live a more authentic, empowered life. Number 9. Fear of confrontation. The fear of confrontation is a common weakness that can significantly limit a man's personal and professional development. This fear arises from a deep-rooted aversion to conflict, and it often stems from concerns about negative outcomes such as rejection, anger, or damaging relationships. Men who fear confrontation tend to avoid difficult conversations, suppress their feelings, and allow issues to fester rather than addressing them directly. While avoiding confrontation might seem like a peaceful or diplomatic approach in the short term, it often leads to greater emotional strain, unresolved problems, and missed opportunities for growth and resolution. One of the core reasons for fear of confrontation is a fear of rejection or failure. Many men worry that if they engage in a confrontation, they might alienate others or cause irreparable harm to a relationship. Whether in the workplace, with friends, or in romantic relationships, they may hesitate to speak up for fear of being misunderstood, criticized, or disliked. This fear often leads to the avoidance of difficult but necessary conversations, such as addressing hurt feelings, setting boundaries, or confronting someone about problematic behavior. While the avoidance might temporarily preserve harmony, it ultimately prevents growth, healing, and the resolution of underlying issues. Another aspect of the fear of confrontation is a lack of self-confidence. Men who struggle with confrontation may not believe in their own ability to handle conflict in a constructive way. They may fear that their point of view won't be respected, or that they won't be able to express themselves clearly. This lack of confidence can make them feel inadequate or powerless, causing them to avoid confrontation altogether. Instead of asserting themselves, they might choose to remain silent, even if they feel strongly about an issue. This inability to stand up for themselves can lead to feelings of frustration, resentment, and helplessness. as they silently endure situations that they wish to change. The fear of confrontation also leads to suppressed emotions, which can be detrimental to a man's mental and emotional health. By avoiding difficult conversations, emotions like anger, disappointment, or anxiety are often bottled up and left unaddressed. Over time, these emotions can build up and create internal stress, contributing to feelings of bitterness, frustration, and even depression. When conflicts are not resolved, the underlying issues tend to persist, potentially damaging relationships or causing long-term emotional damage. A man who is afraid of confrontation may also struggle with communication issues, as his inability to express his feelings or concerns can lead to misunderstandings or missed opportunities for resolution. Additionally, the fear of confrontation can prevent personal growth and development. Conflict, when handled correctly, can lead to positive outcomes such as clarity, resolution, and stronger relationships. However, avoiding confrontation means missing the chance to engage in these growth opportunities. Confronting difficult situations allows individuals to develop critical skills such as problem-solving, negotiation, and emotional intelligence. By avoiding confrontation, a man deprives himself of the chance to learn these valuable skills, stunting his emotional and relational maturity. To overcome the fear of confrontation, a man must first build self-confidence and recognize that confrontation does not necessarily lead to negative outcomes. By approaching conflict with the mindset that it is an opportunity for growth and resolution, he can shift his perspective and view confrontation in a more positive light. Developing assertive communication skills is also essential. This means expressing one's thoughts, feelings, and needs clearly and respectfully, without aggression or passivity. By practicing healthy confrontation, a man can learn to handle difficult situations with calmness and composure, leading to stronger relationships and a more fulfilling life. In essence, the fear of confrontation is a weakness that limits personal growth, strains relationships, and creates emotional distress. By embracing confrontation as a tool for growth and developing the confidence to handle conflict constructively, a man can overcome this fear and become more empowered in both his personal and professional life.